take you further afield. The last of the United States troops have left Afghanistan, and the Taliban are now celebrating victory. This marks the end of a 20-year-long war that's left the Islamist militia stronger than it was in 2001. America's longest war has taken the lives of more than 2,000 soldiers and estimated 240,000 Afghans at a cost of $2 trillion. So what's the next step now for Afghanistan? Can the country prevent the same old mistakes? What's the significance of this development? Let's discuss this now with Zeenat Adam, Deputy Executive Director for the Johannesburg-based Afro-Middle East Centre. Ma'am, good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday View here on eNCA. Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, it is a historic moment celebrated by some and not by others in terms of what we're seeing coming out from the region. But for you, from your perspective, what is the significance of this withdrawal, the final withdrawal of the U.S. from Afghanistan?
Well, it's been an absolutely devastating defeat for the United States and its allies, having begun a war in 2001 following the attacks on the Twin Towers in New York, and it's almost to the day that that had taken place. But to imagine that a world imperialist power like this would have been defeated by simple soldiers of the Taliban was really unexpected. What I think this is a culmination of negotiations that had begun 7 to 8 years ago when the Taliban set up an office in Qatar and decided that they were ready to negotiate with the Americans towards the ending of the occupation of their land and towards finding a peaceful resolution to an ongoing war. The country had been at war for decades. Before the American invasion, it was with the Soviet Union. So the country hasn't known peace for a very long time. And really, they had sat down at the table, discussing with the Americans, trying to find a solution to that.
Yeah. Now, we are seeing from far, we see these visuals of also people wanting to leave Afghanistan and getting onto planes. And there's like a humanitarian crisis developing because they don't want to be under the Taliban rule. Have they got something to fear?
I think that there's a lot of apprehension and perhaps some unfounded fear and perhaps some fear based on what the Taliban's rule was previously. So there is a lot of fear mongering that has been going on in the last 2 weeks, and there have been numerous people in the thousands who had worked for the Allied forces and for the Americans and who are very concerned about their safety. The Taliban have been very clear and vehement in saying that they will not be seeking revenge. There is full amnesty for anyone who was working or collaborating with the Americans, and that they actually are appealing to most of these people who were in civil servant positions, interpreters, in other professions to stay and help rebuild the country. But there is general apprehension. People have been clamoring towards the airport in the last few weeks, trying to get onto the planes and trying to get out. It appears to be a mass exodus. People going to the land borders with Pakistan and with Uzbekistan, other countries as well, coming under deep pressure. But I must indicate, Ntatidan, that the humanitarian crisis has been ongoing. It's not something that started 2 weeks ago simply because the Taliban were coming in. 72% of Afghans have been living below the poverty line and are reliant on aid coming from outside. The United Nations is still active in terms of aid delivery. The World Health Organization has done a delivery to Mazar-e-Sharif yesterday. The Médecins Sans Frontières is still active, and this is really critical. But what we are looking at is because the economy has been brought to a standstill with the freezing of the central bank assets by the IMF, the World Bank, and the United States, and still remaining some sanctions, it's going to be almost impossible for the Taliban to start to put together the pieces once they have established a government. And that is really the first step from here, is the establishment of a government and then working gradually towards post-reconstruction and development.
Yeah, and one wonders if that will be possible because on the other hand, as you said, there's some apprehension and you are seeing citizens, people wanting to flee. But as you said, the economy there has actually been in the doldrums for quite some time. So what's going to happen next? It's going to be a very big one. The global, I mean, is there a global impact here? A country like us, South Africa, we're so far away in the southern tip of the continent, but we live in the global village. We're part of the same planet. I mean, what should South Africa do? I haven't seen a statement yet, as I'm standing here, from the South African Department of International Relations and Cooperation about the latest events that's happening in Afghanistan. I mean, are there issues that we should be concerned about as South Africans?
Absolutely. The world changed after 9/11, and we were not kept out of this change. And what happened in Afghanistan has had repercussions across the world. In fact, today there's an international campaign that has kicked off, including numerous organizations across the globe, looking at bringing attention to what the war on terror has done globally. We also, as South Africa, nationalized some of the war on terror policies and introduced legislation towards that. So we need to reflect and consider whether what we have done as a country has been under pressure from the Americans, or whether it is actually something that we are concerned about. Broader than that, South Africa has been pretty quiet, but I think they're not going to be able to stay quiet any longer. They are part of the G20, who were meeting around what needs to be done in respect of Afghanistan, whether there is going to be recognition of the Taliban as de facto rulers to Afghanistan. And then, of course, we do form part of the BRICS nations, and Russia and China have been very, very strong in their condemnation of the UN Security Council resolution yesterday that was passed 13-2 with 2 abstentions from Russia and China. That Security Council resolution was to apply pressure on the Taliban to ensure safe passage of anyone who wants to leave Afghanistan beyond yesterday's cutoff date. The Taliban have indicated that if they have the visas and they have the passports, there will be no impediment to their departure from Afghanistan. Yet the Chinese, very, very strong statement last night, and the Russians saying that this resolution that was passed last night appears to give a blanket approval to what the Americans had done in the 20 years, and what needs to actually happen is a reflection of what the Americans have perpetrated, not in Afghanistan, but globally. Tatidan, you mentioned some of the statistics of the number of people that have died in Afghanistan, but if we look at the global war on terror, over 800,000 people have been killed. People have been rendered into prisons. Guantanamo Bay is still open, and this is the repercussion of what we're looking at coming up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the Department of International Relations and Cooperation in Pretoria will say about this unfolding situation, because we are in a global village and there's relationships everywhere. We don't have much more time, Zeenat. We're going to have to leave it there, but we will continue discussing this issue of Afghanistan. That was Zeenat Adam, Deputy Executive Director of the Johannesburg-based Afro-Middle East Centre.